Thank you. Well, well, you do set the expectations very, very high here. Hi, my name is Dorte Rømer, or that's why I say it in English, because it sounds like Dorte Rømer when you say it in English. Well, originally, I gave a talk about how to be prepared as an actor to speak, because that is my main field. I come from a very regular background in Denmark, grew up on the island of Amager with 2 parents, and wanted to be an actress, which of course caused a lot of commotion because it's considered lower than the low. In fact, my father told me, I wish you become a prostitute, because then you would have chosen a line of duty with honor. So that kind of set the stage. So from the age of 17, I was basically kicked out and had to fend for myself, which is not unlike a lot of stories that you have shared today. And I decided to take an education as a photographic dealer, because that's what could sustain myself and make sure that I really did have the honorable way of working, not being risque in any way, being respectable and fending for myself. But of course, I wanted to act. I wanted to become an actress, which led me to a career in circus. Yes, a bit of a detour, but I learned some very, very key things there. In circus, we have a saying that nobody's done until everybody's done. We are very important. It's like a big machine, and every wheel, every person, everything has to be completely in sync in order for the whole show to run. And that's a gift I took with me in my life. After completing my 4 years in Scotland, I trained as an actress. I could do a sustainable accent as a Scot and get cast as a Dane, an English person, and a Scot. I came back to Denmark, and I really, really am a sucker for getting papers and getting educations. I don't attend a class. I never do. I always want to have some kind of certificate. So it was natural for me to take communication in with kinetics, that we talk about the body language and how to convey a text and understanding it, into how do we move that into like the business field of communication. And there is a course, a wonderful course, not about just the nature of communication, but strategic communication in business. That is, how do you choose a line of communication? How do you execute it, and how do you plan it? And that was so interesting, but I was the only one without a business. So my teacher said, well, you kind of are your own business. And I thought, yeah, well, I am, because I have the acting line. I do voiceover and speak work. I coach, I teach, I choreograph in fencing. So in that respect, yes, I am a business. So I started out trying to find out these key strategic questions that we always ask. And you can apply them right now to your own business. Do take notes. Because when we have something we want to say, we immediately address, to whom do we address? What's our client? What's our market? What do we want to sell or convey? What do we want to say? And to condense that question, do we want to sell something? Do we want our opinion heard? Or what is it? Why do we want to speak? Do we just want to blabber? It will become blabber. And then, how do we use it? How do we market it? And now, with the So Me, that came after my education, which line of communication do we want? Do we want the press? Do we want the So Me? Do we want it from person to person? Like we have a Danish saying, going from mouth to ear. Do we want it like guerrilla marketing, to move? how do we get about it? And all of these things I kept studying. And one of the communication, I'm so sorry that we don't have like the, that we can project up here, because I really wanted to show you some of the models. But one of the models is, the most basic and simple, is the Laswell journey of communication. And that is, every time we have what we say, we have a piece called noise. So we say something and there's a filtered noise. And that noise can be your persona. It can be a lisp. It can be your clothes. It can be every source that meddles with what you want to say. And then we have the media, the chosen media that we will try to get our message through. There's always noise in that filter as well. That filter in the press can be the journalist. It can be that, I've tried that many times, that my key points are being cut. When I do an interview for television, my point is the one they edit out, so it sounds ridiculous. And then there's the final, how do we perceive it? That can also have the element of noise. So when I do public speaking, that helped me a lot. Because when you sit in a studio, there's a lot of fuss, not a lot of time. Sometimes you have 6 minutes scheduled, and it ends up being 2.5 minutes. And that's a really good tip for you. 3 points. Rehearse 3 points that you want out. You might get more time, that's great. And when I look at my interviews, I can actually see what I do. Sometimes I get a question and I go, that's a really interesting question. By the way, and then I use exactly what I want to convey, because I have so little time and so much important points from other people to convey. I see myself as a bit of a funnel, that all the information and all the talks and all the important things are being funneled through me. So I feel a really sense of obligation. I can't talk about me. I always feel like I have at least the 1,684 women sitting on my shoulders, and I have to be respectful to their story. Also, one of the key points is, I'm not political. You might say, it's out now that the political is personal and the personal is political. But I am not wearing any badge. I'm not representing anyone but myself. I'm not even representing Stop Stillheden, because I don't speak on their behalf. So when we talk about an issue that's gotten like massive of complications, like the hashtag #MeToo, it was fed from a movement, a thing that's been lurking in the dark for so many years. My introduction to this world came out years before the hashtag. It came out of a very, very tough personal experience, or several actually. And in 2007, the Danish Actors Association had a talk, or what do you call it, like an anonymous question thing they were sending around about sexual harassment. And I replied, and they contacted me in the press and said, would you like to talk about it? And I thought, no, I don't. But I thought, well, maybe it's time to show that person who wronged me so that I am watching you, and I will not allow you to hurt another woman. So I stood in front and I told my story. And lo and behold, it was on the front page of the Ekstrabladet. It's like the Daily Mail, you know, the kind of like really sleazy. And I was the only person with my name. Everyone else stated things anonymously. And everything died down. The whole conversation just died. And I kept you know, I knew I was right. I knew I was doing the right thing for the better of everyone in my business, my field of business, being within the acting world. And I kept talking about it, and I kept writing about it, knowing that, you know, I had a great channel, which was Facebook. And then the media started contacting me to, could you please write a piece in one of the more serious business? Could you please come into the radio, television shows? And I kept saying, yes, I can, but please understand, I am just one person. It's my personal view. And they completely accepted that, so that was great. And then the hashtag came, and I was contacted by an actress or a director who said, I've read what you say, would you like to do this? Everything's rumbling in Sweden with the hashtag, I want us to do the same. Let's get people to sign, let's get anonymous statements, and let's make a reading. And this lady, Miss Lærke is not only a director, but a scriptwriter. And she's fantastic at making, not editing, but making sure that out of the 500 testimonies, we chose 100. So we had like a journey that was bearable to watch, because it was not the shock effect we wanted. We could have had 1.5 hours of rape stories, and you know, people would be puking and not getting the point. So we chose stories about like the minor things, like in the press right now we have about, it was like the groping and the hand and the nasty comment, and then ending out with the full-blown rapes that we've had in our business. And that shook the world, and then nothing happened. Nothing. Except the usual questions. Why did you go with him? What were you wearing? Were you tipsy? You wanted it yourself. A lot of women chase men with power. You know the drill, you know all the questions. And everything was muddled. But the point for me was to stay focused, stay calm, stay firm, knowing I know the truth, and I will defend the truth. And I will stick to the wonderful words that Mr. Rana Burke, who started the Me Too movement in America, said, this is not about naming and shaming. This is about healing. And this is about action. Because I stood there and said, okay, I'll come forward, and knowingly this will probably cost my career. But I cannot stay silent and watch the next generation of women being subjected to exactly the same, because nobody tells them what to do, and nobody tells the oppressors and the people who commit sexual violence to stop. And I want to stop the silence. I want to be part of the solution. I do not want to be part of the problem. So that was just a little talk to fill you into how you can make a mark, just like you did today. How can you be part of changing the game in the field that you feel is important and interesting? And it doesn't matter how small it might seem in the biggest, one of the arguments that I constantly hear is, why do you talk about the white middle-class women? What about when people are being subjected to female genital mutilation in the African countries? And I'm like, yes, but I don't have the know-how. I can say I don't impose it, I don't like it, but I don't have the know-how. So by sticking to something, I know my voice will be bigger and enhancing. So on that happy note, I will close off by saying, you can all end the silence. Thank you.
Yes, some more yes. Thank you so much, Dorte, for also sharing that it's very, very important for us to be prepared to improvise during a crisis.
Absolutely.
But more importantly, this whole entire theme of being authentic, and when you are there doing communication, high-level communication, you make yourself also marketable when being authentic. So before we're about to go and switch over to a lovely section, which I really much enjoy, it's going to be a conversation with Martin and Dorte in the comfy chairs. Can we please welcome Martin also on stage, please?
So we have a choice of comfy chairs.
You get the one in the middle.
Yes.
Yes.
You get the master.
I'll take the throne.
Yes.
I don't know why I got the smallest chair, guys.
Oh yeah, well.
But I will tell you, it's the most comfy chair. Very fabulous. So more importantly, Martin and Dorte, you know each other for a while, yes?
Yes.
Yes. If one of you can just first off just share, how did you meet, and what was it like?
You start.
You start.
How was it for you?
No, I don't remember exactly when the first time when we met.
You hired me.
I did. Oh, that was
Yes.
it. Yes, because she did some workshops. I think it was actually fencing and drama and stuff like that for some students I had. And then we kind of just connected, and we stayed in touch and kept having little things to do with each other until a year and a half ago, when Dorte posted on her caster's website that she needed extras for this new crime series that was coming up, and they needed a white middle-class male for...
No, that's not true. No, that's not true. We talked about why you gave up acting. You said, I haven't given up acting. I've just focused on the dance and the dance school. And I said, oh, so you're not a member of the Danish Actors Association. That means I can actually cast you. And you went, yeah, kind of, if I have the time. And then I read the script for the crime scene, or the crime series, Sommerdale Murders. And I thought, oh God, there's a good part in there. There's a very good part as a crime scene tech. And that was you. And I thought immediately that would be very fitting for Martin to have, because then we work against, like, you know, all the crime scenes, like the big butch male, and
what are you implying?
The big butch male, right?
Yeah, because we can be open about that. You are not exactly Thor. You are in character, but Thor is normally like a big Nordic god with lots of hair, and you are not. So I thought, I like that. And also, the other tech that was working there was called Lina, and she was described in the script as a very, just general Danish woman, like in her 40s, Caucasian, a little plump. And I went to the director and I said, well, great, talking about diversity, this series will be marketed in the whole world, and it's all Caucasian. I don't like that. So with your permission, and the writer, she was like, oh, go for it. I would like to have a younger female, and I would like her to represent something, a bit of color. Mm-hmm. And she was like, do you have anyone specific? And I said, oh, yes, I do. I have a young Afro-Danish actress called Diem, who's like a really striking, strong character, and just young and considered sexy. And I would like to have her as like the really strong character as a female. Mm.
So and you didn't consider Martin then for that role?
No, not really.
No.
With a wig, you know. So I was very happy that I could. And again, that's about being authentic. It's about having the power to change things. If I hadn't, as an extras caster, I'm like the lowest of the low, I was allowed in that company to touch and to move and to change a whole script that will be marketed. So now we will see a Danish television series where it's not like the African Danish woman dancing, but she's just a hard-working single mother working in the police force.
You're helping.
And that will change because that's about representation. Now I know that I will see young girls with Afro-Danish background thinking, wow, I can work in the police. That's cool.
Yeah, but you're basically also helping spread diversity in the position that you are in.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm very well aware that, you know, being Caucasian, that some things are easier for me.
Yeah, yeah. And also sometimes you don't get a Thor, but sometimes you're looking for a Martin. And ladies and gentlemen, as you see, sometimes when you start off with, tell us a story of how you met, the man will give a version, and then the woman was like, wait a minute. This is the real version. And then she goes and corrects you, so we can see the relationship there, how they know each other.
And the irony of the situation is that the character of my name is actually Thor.
Yes.
I'll take it. I'll take it. But then this leads us also to the questions we're burning to ask these two, especially because Dorte has also spearheaded the #MeToo movement. But I would like to ask the first question is that you became one of the 2 women who headed the Danish branch of the #MeToo movement. #Stop Stilheden, and I think you both can definitely pronounce it much better than I, but why you in particular starting it with this other woman?
Yes, I don't know why. I think it's because I had nothing to lose. I was already out there, you know. I was always, I had already been labelled the difficult actress, like the unemployable. So I had nothing to lose, and that's what happens. Women, especially, are very, very scared of being unmarketable. And in this business, in 2008, they counted that in Denmark there's only 200 full-time positions in total for actors, men and women, like in all of Denmark, and everyone else works freelance and from job to job. So there's emphasis on being marketable, being sweet and easy to work with, and not labeled the difficult ones. And it's the same thing that we see all over with the Me Too movement. Why is it that young women are especially susceptible to these things is because the oppressors can.
Yeah, yeah. And we also know that right now the oppressors are in different parts of society, and specifically in your industry, you were one of the people who came out. But we're also curious on how now do you relate to the leaders, knowing the position that you're in? How is it now, and has it had any effect, the movement, has it had any effect on your current own business?
Oh yes, profoundly. Because people think that I make money out of this. I don't. I don't get paid to attend all the speaks and talks and interviews, and it takes up hours and hours and hours on end, and it has for years. Even when I went to speak for the Nordic Council of Ministers in Stockholm, they did pay my airfare, but I still had to pay myself for trains and buses and, you know, food and beverage and hotel rooms and stuff. So you need to have like a desire to convey this message.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much. And this desire is costly, but also it's not paid for because it's coming from your heart, it's coming from a reason and a value. And one thing I would actually like to ping pong also with Martin a little bit, because the next thing we want to actually know is that it has, from the stories Martin has told me, and maybe you two can have a discussion about this, but what consequences, oh yes, that laugh has signaled something, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yeah. But what has the consequences, what were they, and were to you personally also in the public face of this movement, since you were kind of spearheading it with another woman? Martin, you have told me some of the stories, so I don't know if you want to start, and then she'll, of course, you know, correct them as they go along.
Yeah, and I do have asked permission from Dorte to talk about these things, because we see each other on a regular basis now, because she's always on set whenever I'm on set. And the first thing that I do when I come on set and I see Dorte is, all right, so what's the status?
Yeah. True.
without making her kind of crack, because I know we're both at work, but the situation is that since January of this year, Dorte and her family has been receiving death threats via email as a result of her having taken the role of standing up for women and fair work treatments. And this situation, what they're about, is obviously not about that women should get more jobs than men, or that X amount of jobs. It's about the treatment once you get the job you deserve. The best person for the right job, obviously, but when you have it, everyone should be treated fairly and be treated with respect. And her just being able to stand up and do that has caused her family to receive ongoing death threats on a daily basis for what we're running on 8 to 9 months now, and police still haven't been able to figure out where it's coming from. So whenever I meet her, I have to check in with her kind of behind the scenes of how close is she to the breaking point, because I know she's close on a daily basis, but we still have to go on to work, both of us. And it's unfathomable to me that Danish police cannot figure out where an email comes from in 2020.
Well, they can, but as they say, then we would have to send a man to Switzerland because that's where the servers are. So, and as one of my friends said, oh no, they shouldn't send a man, they should send a woman. But yeah, but it's true, yes. Since I spoke up, I of course have received numerous, the kind of things you get on Facebook and email, like, you're a fuckhead, I don't believe you, you're so fucking unattractive, I wouldn't fuck you, I don't believe someone would rape you, you bitch. You only say this because you're jealous, you want attention, blah, blah, blah. The usual stuff. After 3 and 4 years, you kind of get used to it. But this was in a league of its very, very own, because the email came at a point where after I spoke politically, and I kind of said, okay, I've done my bit. I've been in this for 3 years so intensively. I'm now going to, gracefully retract and let others take the voice. Yeah. So I had a break for 10 days, and I thought, this is nice. And then the first one said, you should be raped, and it was sent on a cryptic email. And I, of course, didn't respond, took screen dumps, contacted the police, and did what I should. And then the volume increased, like nobody would rape you. And I can hardly say this without being very emotional, because it said, you're so fucking ugly, I won't rape you, but I'll rape your daughter. And she's 10. And then things moved on, like they would say, I will go for your family, and they would write our home address. And they started, and I say they because we know that it's one man starting it, and then he's spreading our email informations and stuff on one of the groups at the Tor network. Not that Thor, I know. But the dark web. So we have all these incels getting praised and like, oh yes, you're the man, you go for her. And they have actually been on our premises and our private address. And that morning they said, we'll come and kill you. And they wrote our address. I was out with the dog and my daughter for a couple of hours, and I came back, and they've stolen a chair on our balcony. So they were there. And then 2 hours later, it says, you can't fucking stop us because the police is our friends. And then we just had to wrap up and stack things and disappear. And I still had to go to work on the Summer Delt series 14 to 16 hours. I can't let my daughter walk to school alone. She can't. She's 10. She's starting to get independent, like get her own key and get in and, make herself a cup of cocoa and feel like all grown up for half an hour until mom and dad comes home. And that was taken away from us. I can no longer share things on email, where I am, my whereabouts. I can't take a snap, happy snap, family, eating out, waving. I can't do that. I can't announce that I'm here. I can't announce if I visit Martin at home because I would subject him to threats in case they come after him. So everything is monitored suddenly, and they are around our house and the police won't stop them. And it's a consequence so dire, and that was a long talk to get into my point. When we talk about freedom of speech, this is the ultimate prize, because eventually I will shut up, if not because I'm tired of it, worn down, or cracked, or in the mental hospital, or dead, and I will not let them win. So the more they threaten, the more I move forward. But it's at great expense, and as of now, my husband, who's also the father of our child, is very sympathetic to the cause and supports me. But I think he's at the point where he says, you have to stop, because he can't work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's just... This is an intense situation, and more often than not, you show and display great strength, because it's not easy. As you said, it comes with a big price and a huge expense, mentally, socially, emotionally, and all of these things. And I can only imagine, but how would you, since you're a film caster for the Danish TV series Sommerdahl, knowing that your family is at risk, I'm already shaking, thinking that if I have to live like this, or if one of you has to live like this, how do you go to work? Since you say the show must go on, how do you go to the set every day? What do you do? What do you think about to go back and basically the show must go on face?
Well, I do smoke a lot of cigarettes, and I drink an awful lot of coffee. And I have half an hour to work at least, so that kind of transcends me into. And the good thing is that working in the film industry is so stressful that you just can't think about it. But it helps that when I started doing this with Lærke and Stop Stillheden, because a lot of people needed to talk about what they've experienced. So they would call me for advice. Yesterday I had a long conversation with a young man who said, what can I do? My girlfriend's been sexually harassed. How do I get by it? So a lot of people contact me, and I really want to stay open to help and give my advice, saying that I'm just a person, I'm not a psychologist, I'm only me. But they want to approach me with the questions. I want them to be able to get hold of me. But I can't have a ringtone on my phone.
Yeah.
It's really amusing to me, because I can see that body and mind, they're not connected. Because when the phone rings, I twitch, and I break out in sweats if I have a ringtone and notifications. I haven't had that on my phone for 3 years. So I miss a lot of calls, but also I'm always close to my phone because I have to. So the changing of scenery from being under threat and then going into work for 12, 14, 16 hours a day, and always running around on set, in some sense, gives it a bit of relief.
Yeah.
So there's two kind of stresses.
Yeah. From work, and then also from this managing it as well.
Yeah,
but also
I can see, I can't really swap.
Yeah.
Because then I jump in my head from working stress to personal stress.
Yeah.
So it's always just stress.
But is there a boundary, because people approach you trying to get in touch with you, whether to do gigs, whether to speak somewhere, or whether for advice? Is there a boundary for you that you set also, so that you can...
I'm not very good at it.
No.
Actually, I'm not. I should be better. I really should.
Yeah.
But it's like I say amusingly, that people call me on Fridays, like I've been raped, and I'm standing there buying candy on Fridays, as we do in Denmark for Disney show, and I can't tell, could you please hold on? It's like, yeah, you can have for 5. And my daughter, I know that she's suffering because everyone else comes in front of her. And it's terrible to admit that as a parent. But I of course include her in I know it's hard and you're only 10, and this is important, and I'm actually doing it for you and the rest, and I try to compensate being a mother at other times.
It's a tough job. But actually, as I was listening to Dorte speak, I noticed Martin having water coming into his eyes. And I'm just saying that you're here also supporting her, knowing her for as long as you do. How do you feel about it, hearing it as you're not in the same exact situation, but you're in the supporting role, and I think some of us could be in that type of role. How does it affect you? And then, yeah.
Well, the thing is that the reading that Dorte mentioned earlier that they did with Stop Stilheden, was that 3 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. At a medium-sized theater in Copenhagen, where they had gathered these 500 testimonials from women in Danish film and theater about sexual harassment. And they did this reading. Dorte was one of the 4 actors on stage reading out these stories, and I was there at that reading. The house, I think, it might be my memory wanting to remember it this way, but I think there was about somewhere between 200 and 300 people in the audience. I remember it like there was 5 men among the 300.
That's true.
And I was one of the 5 men, and then there were 295 women sitting there listening to it. And it was something like that. And I had a proper epiphany somewhere in the middle of that reading. I was just sitting here listening to these stories and going, yeah, that's terrible. Oh, did you really go? I'm glad I've never been like that. I'm glad I've never acted that way. I'm glad I've never subjected a woman to that kind of experience. And somewhere in the middle, there was this woman that said, I don't remember what she said, but the point of what she was talking about was just that she wasn't able to go back to work on that set without being forced to think about that person in a different way than the way she was supposed to think about that guy, which was a professional context. She wasn't able to relate to that director or colleague or whatever it was in the same way, because now she was forced to have a personal opinion about that guy on stage. And suddenly I went, oh my God, I have done that. I have flirted with a woman in a professional situation where that was not professional, that was not called for, because that was not what I was there for. I was not in that situation to flirt, but I have. And by doing that, I had forced that woman to relate to me in a way that she was not supposed to relate to me in that situation. And that was still force. It was still me enforcing her and her opinion, into the situation. And it was such an epiphany when I heard that reading, that's what half of this is about. It's not just the rapes and the kind of slaps in the ass and the stuff. It's that forcing other people to have an opinion about you that they shouldn't have. And when I then, look at where we are today with how I know Dorte and what she has gone through, it's so crazy how the scale is out of balance with how simple it should be to expect that don't force a woman to have a personal opinion about you if you're not in a situation where that's what it's about, versus her having to go through what she's gone through where she can't have a normal life because she just expects basically nothing but that, which should be completely fundamental and so easy to do. And to me, that that balance is just way off.
Yes.
There's many ways to go about it, and I know this is a very polemic and contentious issue. But also, more importantly, there are a few questions that I have for Dorte and Martin, but also to open up to the audience. If one of you has a burning question, you can also raise your hand, and Mikkel, our sound man, will come with the mic. Or, yes, Francesca, did I get it right? Yes.
Thank you.
And I just met you. So if you have a burning question, you can also just raise your hand. and she'll come to you. Yes, please, the gentleman over there.
I have a question which kind of throws back to a couple of minutes ago, but the question regarding like the idea of being perceived as the complicated person. Obviously, the field of acting is a much narrower field and word spreads faster. But what I'm really curious about is if the rumor of being difficult only is perceived by new acquaintanceships, or if it also kind of acts retroactively, and that people who presumably would have some kind of association of or a knowledge of what kind of character and how malleable you are in terms of professional regards, not in terms of manipulation whatsoever, if they seem to also change their perception based on the way that medias or other people within the field might create a portrayal of you.
Yeah, before they answer the question, I'm just going to invite you one more time, because it was a lot of words, and it's good. I'm glad that you're interested, but would you rephrase the question just a little bit more simply, just so that we understood?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Has the way that the relation you've had to previous people within the field changed by the way that rumors spread about a person or perceptions, per se?
Well, I can only speak for myself. A lot of people have contacted me saying that now I understand what you went through. I'm sorry I didn't support you. And that's very, very nice of them. But being marketable or being the difficult, let me change that, saying now I always find it intriguing. So when I hear about the difficult actress, I'm like, oh wow, you are interesting, because if you can fuck up that much, oh sorry, I'm not used to use the F word, but if someone spreads rumors about you being difficult, that person is probably telling the truth. It's like a litmus test. I find that very interesting. So, like the actress Connie Nielsen had a wonderful piece, you should Google that. It says, I've never heard about that woman. We've all heard about, oh, that woman who slept her way to success. And she just says, I've never met that woman. She's an urban myth. She doesn't exist. So, yeah, but I hope that kind of answered.
Yeah.
Because people do perceive me as a troublemaker.
Yes, and then speaking of troublemakers, we actually have two behind you.
Two troublemakers.
Two
great.
troublemakers that also want to ask those questions. So these are going to be the last two questions. And please state your name and then your question.
My name is Musna. I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for seeing the million of people who have been disbelieved, for giving the million of women a voice, and for speaking for the thousands of women. I salute you and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
And our next question goes to David. Please stand up, David.
Somewhat a little unfair now. I had a question, I still have it, but it's about instinct. I figured all the women who have become stars or whatever, there are some predatory behaviors. And sometimes our instincts are there to defend us. And if you actually know, or you listen to your instincts, I'm sure you've actually involved with people who probably didn't listen to their instincts. They could have got away, but they got trapped. Is it because they want the position to become a star and it costs what it cost? So instead of listening to your instincts, like what Marcus was talking about, the third voice, would you actually stop where you're heading, knowing fully well the consequences of your actions is going to put you in a position where you're going to be scarred for the rest of your life? But because you want to get to where you're going, you're willing to put a stop to, disregard your instincts to do so. Have you met all the people you represent? The thousands, not probably millions who don't know you as well. They too have instincts, and they know fully well they had to keep away from it. But those you represent, have they done likewise, or have they just jumped in the fire because of it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was interesting.
Yeah, very loaded question,
Oh
no?
dear, lots of...
Yeah.
First, let's talk about instincts. I find that very interesting because you've never seen an animal out on the savannah going, I was just walking away and bang, there was a lion. No, you always see them stop and react, and then they get attacked. I was completely taken aback. I'll tell you, do we have time for that?
Yes.
I'll tell you shortly about one of the things I experienced and one of that, like the grand case that's been touring around the press. I was in a show. After the show, we went for a drink. I was driving, so I, of course, had like a Coca-Cola. And I said bye to the crew, and I left the bar. And the director followed me and said, can I get a lift? And I was like, sure. We sat in the car. I knew he just had a second child, and I congratulated him. I knew his wife, very beautiful, a famous Danish actress/dancer. And we were talking about that. And he said, I really have a project I would like to talk to you about. And I was like, bing, 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 next job. Of course, I was up for it. And I asked him on the way back to the place where I lived, where can I drop you off? And he said, no, in front of your place is fine. And I just thought, yeah, well, maybe he likes a wee stroll. Fine, like we do. And we were talking. And I was wearing similar to what I was wearing now. Being sober, having never flirted, he was my director. And we stopped the car, and he said, so how about, like, a drink? And I was like, I haven't cleaned my flat, you know, I'm so messy, I can't invite anyone up there. I said, well, there's a bar, and now I can have a drink because I placed the car. And he went, relax, Rømer, as I'm called. Relax, it's just me. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I'll just, you know, pop the knickers under the sofa bed. Put the kettle on, sat down in the sofa, he was in a chair, and suddenly he rose, and I'll demonstrate what he did to Martin. Are you prepared for that? Mm-hmm. He rose, went over to me, put his knee on my leg, pinned me down, took my shirt and ripped it open. And I just thought, what the? But he was my director, so I kind of closed, tried to bring my modesty, and rose up and said, no, that's not good. And he followed me and smacked me up against a wall, said, can't you see how great we look together? And I'm like, panicking, but still being like calm, because I didn't want to upset him, and I was afraid he was going to hit me. I was afraid that, you know, I would lose my job and whatever. And I wanted to say no to him, and I did physically say no, you have to get home to your wife, open the door so I could shout for help for the others in the apartment building and shut him out. And after that, of course, the next morning, you know, didn't sleep much. Told my male colleagues that I trusted, and they were like, I'm going to fucking kill him. And I'm like, no. And I approached the director's friend who was in the company saying, you know what happened? And he just went, no, I don't want to hear it. And bang, I knew he had done it before. So I called the police to report him, and I said, I can't report because I have no marks and nothing happened. And he went, what's his name? Oh, he's done it before. But he succeeded. And they were young girls. They went to his hotel room. And they were drunk. He raped them, and they wouldn't take the report. And I knew I had something massive because I was sober. He was my boss. And people say, oh, you shouldn't allow men in your flat. I'm like, well, how do you get the plumber in then? You know, I'm not afraid of men. He was a friend, a working colleague. I had no flags. So about instincts, I had no physical rumors, anything to guide me that, oh, he's a dodgy guy. Mm-hmm. So, and that's part of the shock treatment. And now again, you know, I can feel my goosebumps here, because that's what I hear all over. So many women say there were no red flags. I never knew. I didn't have a clue what happened. Mm-hmm. I was there and bang, it happened. And there's different reactions. You freeze, you go into fight mode, or you just get so shocked that someone you think you know could subject you to it. Mm-hmm. And it takes a while for the response to kick in. It took me a good while, like a good few 8 hours, until I spoke with my colleagues, for me to know how I was going to get by it. And that's the most important thing to take away. We don't always react the way we should. Yeah.
Instinct-wise, right?
Instinct is really something that we take as, you know, a God-given thing in our biology, but we can't trust our instincts. We just can't.
And I know right now this is a big, contentious, also polemic issue that's going on with #MeToo. But of course, our session right now with the conversation with Martin and Dorte has actually exceeded the time. So the questions will have to wait.
Oh, what a shame! I would like for it to go on because it's so important.
I could see the instincts, but however, I'm just going to say that we won't be taking more questions, just to respect the time of what is to be expected. Right? Right? I don't know where I got that. It's not from the pregnancy book, guys. It's not. But I would like to say on behalf of Talks for Change and also the hostess of today, and also for the audience, I think we thank you greatly for coming and sharing that vulnerability, but also speaking with a powerful voice and sharing it, because it starts and sparks discussion and talks for change. That's when you hear the film title. Roll credits. And also for Martin here, like for also having this relationship, sharing it and putting it up on the stage, can we all please give them a round of applause just for sharing their story?